everyone, today the ARIA Lab team interns are going to explain the process of getting the Kobuki to Tele-op.
So, the very first step in this process is to download Ubuntu 22.04. The laptop we used was Asus 14 VivoBook 14X Notebook, but you can use whatever your heart desires. We are all going to use Ubuntu 22.04 to run ROS for the Kobukis. Okay, so step numero uno. Download Ubuntu 22.04 on your personal computer. Moving on, download Etcher on that same personal computer. This is needed in order to flash Ubuntu into the USB. Then use Etcher to flash Ubuntu to the USB drive as mentioned previously. Scene.
Once the software is in the USB drive, you can plug into the USB drive into the computer that you want Ubuntu on. To install, you will have to get the laptop into boot up mode. Boot up mode is basically a mode where you can look at the different partitions you have in your computer. So like in case you have Windows, you can look at if you have Windows, if you have Linux, if you have all that. And most computers, that's by hitting the escape key multiple times when turning it on. Once you do that, you'll be prompted to choose an operating system. You should be able to see something that says Ubuntu on there. You'll select that and then follow the prompts given to install. If this is done correctly, you'll see the jellyfish screen that you see on the slideshow.
If you have Ubuntu installed, the next step will be installing Docker Desktop. Docker Desktop is important because it reduces the time you spend on complex setups, allowing you to spend more time on writing code. To install it, follow the link in the documentation. The main step that you're going to need to follow is to download the deb package. Be sure to open the deb file using the software installer.
So the next step is to install Docker with ROS1. Now, Docker is basically a tool that helps you run different programs on your computer without having to worry about those programs conflicting with one another. And the way that works is each program is placed into its own container, and each one gets to run smoothly and simultaneously. So the way you can do that, the way you can download this is from the apps menu. You want to open a new terminal, and to install Docker, you want to type in that command into the directory. Alright, so now that you've installed Docker, you're going to want to create a Docker file. Now this Docker file holds the instruction to build the image, and this image is then used to create a container, which I've mentioned on the previous slide. And the container holds the running image and gives us the ability to execute commands for code. And so you need to create the Docker file to create a container. So you're going to do this on the same terminal that you used to install Docker, and type in the command below. And the last line will open the Docker file that you can type. Alright, so inside this Docker file that you have just now created, you want to insert the code because this is the code which builds the image. And so yeah, you just copy and paste it into your Docker file.
The next step is to build the image, and the image is basically a collection of code that will make sure our Docker container runs. So to build the image, type in this command. This might take a while because it's trying to compile all this code, so just be patient. Okay, so the next step is to create a new volume. And a volume, basically when Docker runs a container and you leave the container, it erases all the files and things you've done in there. And we don't want that to happen, so a volume is a way to save the files. So basically you're taking the files that were in Docker and connecting them to your computer and your hard drive. So type in that command and you'll create a new volume to save all the stuff you do.
So the next step is to create a shell script. What a shell script essentially is a group of commands that are put into a file that when that file is run itself, it executes all those commands in order, and it's essentially just to run multiple commands at the same time. What you want to do is you want to run the first two commands up top first to actually create the shell script, and then paste the sort of paragraph below into the text editor, save it, and you'll have a shell script that can be run later.
Okay, so the next step is to create an alias in your bash rc file. So you can use the first nano /.bashrc command to open the bashrc file, and then at the bottom type the command. And an alias is basically just a shortcut that lets you run that line of code without having to type out the whole line. So you can, instead of typing out that whole line, you can just type run docker and it will open the new Docker container. Okay, the next step is to save the file and then run the command. So save the file by hitting Control-X and then Enter, and that will get you back into the terminal. And then outside, type the source command to ensure that you can connect to the bashrc file. And then you're able to type the run docker command into the terminal so that you can open a new Docker container.
Okay, the next step is installing dependencies. And dependencies are basically packages of commands that your computer needs to know so that when you type in the command, it knows what to do. So basically type in these lines of code. The first one, apt update, will update and refresh your software, and then the other ones will install important dependencies. Okay, the next step is to open a new terminal in your computer. So go to the apps menu, open a new terminal, and then in this new terminal, type these lines of code. This will connect your computer to the robot. You should hear a beep, and it'll print kind of the robot status to your screen.
All right, and finally, we're gonna wanna open another new terminal. And so we can do this from either the apps menu, or you can do Control-Alt-T to open up that new terminal. And you're gonna enter in that final line of code, and when you hear the beep go off on your robot, you know that you've succeeded in Tele-op. So have fun driving your robot.
Here are some of the sources that we referenced in the video. Thank you so much for watching.